Welcome back, everybody. This module in this ergonomics course is going to be about administrative controls and throwing a stretch and flex program too. So administrative controls, you're going to hear a lot about those from me in any of the courses that I teach because they're part of the hierarchy of controls. We're going to talk about them a little bit too, but let's get this show on the road. All right. Chapter 5, administrative controls and stretch and flex programs. Objectives here to recognize the various administrative controls, their advantages, limitations, and several policies regarding the reduction of workplace hazards. Again, I'm going to talk about this again. Proactive, acting in anticipation of future problems, needs, or changes. Reactive, occurring as a result of stress or emotional upset or after the fact. Which is best regarding safety? Well, you know, they say about OSHA regulations, they say they're written in blood. Reason being, they were reactive. Somebody gets hurt, killed, they write a regulation. That happens. It happens, unfortunately, in real life too much. But it's best to be proactive. Can we anticipate somebody getting hurt and then do something about it before it happens? So that's best regarding safety. But those are terms that you should be pretty familiar with. Administrative controls are procedures and practices that limit exposure by control or manipulation of work schedule or the manner in which work is performed. They change the way people work. That's the real simple, straightforward definition of an administrative control. They change the way the people work. They don't change the workplace. They don't change the equipment. They change the way people work. And we're going to talk about that a lot. This is the hierarchy of controls triangle that you're going to see in every course that I teach because it's very, very important to anybody in the safety business. When you're confronted with something, something new, you're out in the field, and a new piece of equipment comes in, let's say, or a new process, or your company buys a new company, and you have to be in on what are we going to do about the safety of this particular situation here. So rather than just flying by the seat of your pants, you got a roadmap here. You can say, well, can we physically remove this hazard? We just get rid of it, eliminate it. Sometimes that's possible, but not too often. Substitution, can we replace this with something less hazardous? This comes into hand play mostly with chemicals. Can we use a less dangerous chemical, less hazardous chemical? And but that happens sometimes. You can use something less hazardous. Engineering controls, and engineering controls isolate people from the hazard. The most common engineering controls guarding. You put a guard around something, you can't get to it. Engineering controls are great because they're passive. They're there all the time. Nobody has to put them on. I mean, they have to put them on, of course, but I mean, during the operation of the machine, they're there. It's not like PPE, we have to put it on, or administrative controls, we have to teach somebody. They're already there. And they isolate people from the hazard. That's the definition of engineering controls. Administrative controls, as I said, change the way people work. Probably the most common one there is training, policies, warnings, that type of thing. Change the way people work. PPE, protect the worker with personal protective equipment. That's the last line of defense. If nothing else works out of this triangle, then you have to have PPE. PPE requires training, requires the person to put it on. So there's a lot of problems in there. But when it comes to ergonomics, there's not too many engineering controls that work. And PPE, very little, knee pads, that type of thing, very little PPE comes into play. Most of the time, it's administrative controls when you come to ergonomics. That's why this chapter is called that. Level of hazard mitigation is also called the hierarchy of controls. And here we go. We're getting the same thing. Eliminate entirely, outsource it maybe, substitute a different procedure, such as a less hazardous chemical. Engineering controls isolate people from the hazard. Machine guarding, distance, tools you can use. Administrative, change the way people work. Training, job rotation, alternate work activity, stretch and flex programs. PPE, protect the worker. Last line of defense, not usually applicable in ergonomics. You're going to hear this again, this hierarchy controls over and over again. And I hope you take it to heart and learn it because it's going to be the good part of your foundation of your safety training. So why is it so important to give you a guideline, kind of a roadmap, so that you can look at a problem with a sense of priorities? You're not just throwing up, see what sticks. You're going to look at it with some kind of an intelligent system of handling it. The typical injury progression is this. Step one is fatigue. Typically, a large percentage of workers suffer fatigue at the end of the day. That makes sense, doesn't it? Discomfort. If this level is reached, employees typically rest, or they might take anti-inflammatory medication if they have a little bit of discomfort. But you're not talking about anything that's too bad here still. It's just discomfort level. But then the next level is pain. And this keeps employees from performing an activity, even at home or at work. When it gets to this level, it gets to be pretty serious because the next step up is an injury. This requires medical attention, possibly lost time or OSHA recordable. The injury is serious. So the fatigue part of it, if you can stop the fatigue, you can stop this progression. And that's where ergonomics comes in a lot of times. Stop the fatigue and you can stop the injury progression. What is muscle fatigue? It's the result of the energy consumption and loss of contractile function of the muscle. There are two types of this fatigue, acute and chronic. Acute versus chronic fatigue. Acute fatigue has a recent onset and is temporary in duration. It is usually related to excessive physical activity, lack of exercise, insufficient rest or sleep, poor diet, dehydration, increase in activity, or other factors. That's acute fatigue. The chronic fatigue persists, and recovery is not quickly anticipated. It can take a longer time so fatigue can also come in acute and chronic, just like injuries and other things. The problem with allowing fatigue to set in is it does the following. It degrades physical work performance. It causes the worker to perform at a slower rate, may hinder one's ability to perform certain exertions, may cause one to suffer from tremors and other symptoms that interfere with precision, degrades your mental capacity, increases the error rate. When you're tired, you have fatigue, you're going to make more mistakes. So again, stopping fatigue stops the progression of injury. I go along with this 100%. I'm on the seafood diet. On my seafood's bacon, I'm all for it. Administrative control is job rotation or alternate work activity. They're similar. Job rotations, the goal is to use different muscle groups, giving specific body parts a chance to rest and cover. So that may be that in the morning you're doing one job and in the afternoon you do another job, or every break time you switch. If possible, rotate work so the heavy work is performed in the morning and lighter tasks are performed during the day. Not always possible, but it's possible. That's a good way to do it. Training and worker education is important. Provide information on proper body positioning, like neutral posture, or proper lifting techniques in the workplace. Educate employees on how to identify work-related musculoskeletal disorders, the risk factors, signs, and symptoms before an injury occurs. Training requires constant reinforcement to be effective in changing behaviors. You can't just change somebody once and say, yep, they're trained. Not the way it works, not with people. Stretch and flex programs. These are pretty important. The frequency of rest pauses determines their effectiveness. The higher the frequency, the more effective the rest becomes. Higher frequency does not necessarily mean a long time. Stretching increases blood flow and whisks away waste product. It increases flexibility and is less likely to injure, is less likely to injure a warm muscle. Many ergonomists believe that at least a 5-minute rest is required for the maximum benefit. Generally 50 to 55 minutes work and then a 5-minute rest. Of course, this all depends on the type of task. If the task is more demanding, then more breaks are required. Stretching increases workers' ability to endure both mental and physical stresses. It increases blood flow and replenishes nutrients. Micro breaks can be implemented throughout the day. An example is a community printer, which makes people get out of their chairs periodically. Another example is to stand while using a telephone. At OK Foods, we had a community printer, so every time I print something, I had to get up off my chair, go get it. That was good. And stand while using a telephone, that's just a habit of mine, even at home. If I'm on the phone, I'm usually standing on, walking around with it. But those are good ideas. Micro aerobic stretching can reduce fatigue caused by sustained positioning. Sustained positions reduce the oxygen and blood flow to muscle tissue. Alternating positions or tasks allow muscles to recover so they perform more efficiently. You change the task, you change the muscles that you use. Athletes do not start an event without warming up first. Have you ever been to any kind of a sport event, pro football game, pro baseball game? Pre-shift warm-up programs they're out there on the field warming up. But these pre-shift warm-up programs can increase the temperature of muscles, increase healthy blood flow, and improve muscle coordination. When I worked in California, they moved the pillow department from one plant over to the Carson plant to the Commerce plant. And there were stuffing pillows all day, the same muscles all day long, doing the same thing, stuffing these pillows. So we had them start every day and after every break with a warm up. They would hit all the women would line up, and the supervisor would lead them through some exercises, and that really helped. That really reduced the number of injuries we had in that department. Stretching increases the joint's ability to move through a greater range of motion, thus reducing the risk of musculoskeletal injury. So your better range of motion means somewhere along the line, you move your muscles, its injury is going to occur. But if you can change that by stretching it, you can make the injury less likely to occur or less serious if it does occur. When the Puget Sound Naval Shipyard instituted a stretch and flex program, they compared 2 dry docks, and one that had the program had a 20% reduction in back injuries, and they only had a 50% participation rate. So only 50% of the people participated in it, but they had a 20% reduction in back injuries. That's pretty significant. Back injuries are bad, back injuries are painful, and back injuries are expensive. Well, if you can if you can get rid of 20% of them, that's a win situation. If you get everybody to participate, you can get rid of 40% of them. Controls for temperature extremes. Temperature extremes are also a problem too. Wear proper attire, particularly the feet, hands, and head. Obviously, they're the ones going to get coldest. Ensure proper hydration. NIOSH recommends 8 ounces of water every 20 minutes. That's, of course, mostly in the heat. Establish a work regimen based on task-specific conditions. Alternate light work in warm temperatures or at the end of the day, and heavy work in cooler temperatures and after a light warm-up. Schedule work throughout the day. Avoid concentrations of strenuous work. Not always possible, but if you can do it, it's a good idea. Implement fitness for duty standards to avoid placing high-risk individuals in potential heat stress situations. Now, you can't just take, although some companies do, a job and say, okay, no, this job's for men, this job's for women. We're going to hire men too because they can move the stuff around. You used to be able to do that. Used to do that a lot of times, but they can't do that anymore. But you can do fitness for duty standards. You can have a program, probably work it out with your local clinic or your workers' comp provider, something like that, and you can come up with the standards that this person needs. And let's just say it's lifting 50 pounds and carrying it 10 feet. Okay, you can have them go and be tested by somebody, and occupational therapist or something like that, and make sure that person can do it before they come to work. And if you have a lot of injuries in a department, you can do that. And it's not anything to do with person's gender or age or anything else, because that doesn't come into play. It's just whether they can do the job or not. So acclimate new or return to work employees in hot environments, extremely hot, give them 5 days to get acclimated. That's not a bad idea too. So key points from this chapter are: administrative controls are procedures, and practices that limit exposure by control of work schedule or manner in which work is performed. They change the way people work, reduce the exposure to ergonomic stressors, and thus reduce the cumulative dose to any one worker. Administrative controls are most effective when used in combination with engineering controls and are part of an ergonomics program. Again, engineering controls don't come into play too often when it comes to ergonomics. Reduce exposure, curtail fatigue, decrease recovery time, and you can save a lot of money. Wasn't that fun? All right. That's all for this particular chapter.